Well, hello. Hi, everyone. Happy Saturday. It's me, Mike Brock, coming at you from Notes from the Circus. It's Saturday at the Circus, as it turns out. It's sunny here in beautiful Southern California, Los Angeles to be most accurate. And it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome back if you've been here before. Welcome if this is your first time. As always, this will be recorded, and so people can watch the recording of it afterwards. But I'm actually I'm gonna I don't know what should we talk about today? There's so many things going on. I'm gonna put my AirPods in here actually, just um um so I can hear the well actually why am I putting my AirPods in? I don't always have headphones. I don't have to have headphones in to talk to. Why am I doing that? I'm actually this is silly. This is silly. Um actually um hi. Hi. Um Yesterday we had a fun episode, I think, of or live stream. I don't know if we should call it an episode. Maybe it's an episode. Am I doing a podcast? I don't know. What is this? It's a live stream. Um, we had a bit of a meditative episode. I tried to um do something that was pedagogical, right? And demonstrate some philosophical principles, moral reasoning. I want to talk about like culture today, though. I want to talk about some cultural critiques. I think maybe a good place to start is the wedding of Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez. Um, I've been reading. I mean, it really. Surely you've heard of this. It's hard not to have noticed that Mr. Bezos is uh, you know uh, had his nuptials with Miss Sanchez. Um, and it really is. Uh, there is something really like culturally poignant about it, and I think a lot of people have kind of been picking up on it. Where there's a sort of a vulgarity to it, right? I think a lot of people feel that for many reasons. Um, when I look at it, when I sort of observe this display, of extreme ostentation, right? It has to be said. Um, beyond ostentation, right? Ostentation, like one might even say obscene, right? Display of private wealth colonizing, one of humanity's great public treasures, right? Venice, right? As the backdrop of their wedding. It's the circus made literal, right? In my sort of like, mythopoetic stance, or poetic framing, right? It's the example of an authentic civic space transformed into a private performance venue right before all of our eyes, right? Um, and in Venice, right? Venice carries, right, some symbolic weight, right? It's the impossible city that shouldn't exist, right? It was built through collective human ingenuity and maintained through like centuries of shared commitment, people working together to build and maintain something beautiful and improbable, right? It's a living example, right, of the power of community, right, working together in the real world. And now, right, with Jeff Bezos, right, the and Lauren Sanchez, it's their rented stage, right, for what can only could charitably be described, right, as a grotesque display of oligarchy and feudalism. It feels feudalistic, right? This like um uh I mean, yeah, it's hard. I mean, when you just sort of like sit back and think about the symbolism of it, right? The symbolism of Venice, um, and sort of the history there. Like assuming that you are familiar with the history, you should be familiar with history, right? I mean, it's I think the importance of sort of having historical perspective, I think it really comes through in moments like this. Um, but I think, I mean, I think the tragic irony of it all, like, runs, like, deeper, right? Bezos, right? I mean I mean, I mean, like, look, I'm not like a leftist, right? I'm like a fucking socialist, and I don't wanna, like, I don't wanna trick anyone into thinking that's, like, that's what I am when I make this criticism, but, like, if you're gonna, like, really go deeper into this, you know into the allegories and mythology here, right? One might notice, right, that Bezos made his fortune by systematically destroying the kind of local human scaled commerce that represents what Venice kind of was, right, and is. So so like one can sort of pull this critique up, right, even more, right, and sort of think about Amazon's optimization of human interaction and into frictionless consumption, right, and its reduction of workers to algorithmic variables. It's elimination of the messy inefficiencies of actual community. Um, and to and to sort of capstone this, right, with the wedding of Bezos and Sanchez, right, it's now he now celebrates by turning the sort of extraordinary achievement of human community into personal theater. So it's a perfect metaphor. Perfect metaphor, I think, for the cultural and political moment. um I'm not really usually a cultural critic. Maybe I should be. But that the sort of the you know the, you really have an appreciation, right, for the New Deal era reformers, right? When you see something like this, it's really kind of like perspective shifting, really. When you see this, and I mean, I guess there's probably I know that there's cultural critics on the right that also see this decadence, and they have their own critiques of this. And I'm showing up from a very sort of liberal perspective here, and certainly there's some convergent perspectives there. But I'd say that the right wing critiques of this decadent moment, if I am to sort of venture there, because we're having this conversation out in the open. Why not? Fuck it, right? We'll talk about some of my other ventures into cultural criticism with my piece on the All In podcast that I wrote this morning. But I mean, I do want to say that this, to the extent that I do have some agreement with this, right wing intellectual critique, right, about sort of the decadence of the moment. Um, and you've got this. I mean, I just want to be very clear. I mean, these are fascists, that are making these criticisms, and so like one always sort of worries about taking one's agreement with someone who is so disaligned with your sort of you know basic sort of civic ethic too far. um but yeah, you have this passage press and these sorts of conversations, which I've been trying to pay a little bit more attention to. Um, you know, it's dark and Nietzschean, as one might expect. Um, and sort of like frames things right in terms of like dynamism and stagnation. You saw that kind of come through in the Peter Thiel interview with Ross Douthat. Um, and I have and I have like pretty uh I pretty like scathing like moral critique of sort of that stance there, right? That and there's like they get another conversation, so there's other like threads of this. Like we can talk about vitalism at some point, which is I think a really sort of interesting thread of like right wing intellectual thought. That's all the rage in some of these circles. Um, so I do I've been trying to pay more attention to these arguments. But I mean they're fascists, just to be clear, right? Just to be clear. I mean there's no doubt about this. That they are in fact fascists. And I'd be happy to debate them on some of these points if they disagree. But let's talk about the All In podcast. I wrote a piece about that today, right? I wrote the All In besties. We got Jason Calacanis and David Sachs, Chamath Palihapitiya, and David Friedberg. I mean, my take on them was quite scathing, right? If you've read it, if you haven't read it, you should read it. Um, I've gotten some feedback, private feedback, as well as some public feedback. I'm gonna respond to some of the public feedback I got. Maybe talk about some of the private feedback that I got for that piece. And I want to talk about, and once again, we're talking about culture, right? We're talking about culture today. And so a lot of these things I'm going to talk about are very like very deep sort of, you know, cultural criticisms. And well, let's just go. I mean, let's not over intellectualize it. You can follow me as we go. I think I'm easy to follow, right? So my stance is that these men are. I said they're evil, right? And that's a really strong word, right? To call someone evil. What does one mean by that? What do you mean that they're evil? And this, of course, was the nexus of a protest by at least one person. I don't know where I put it. I don't know what tab I like buried this in, but eh, you know, it elicited a response that mirrored a you know a response that I had gotten sort of privately from somebody who's a mutual friend of of myself and one of the besties. I'll not gonna like out them, but this sort of perspective on how when you say something like this, right? And I found the comment, but I'm going to complete my thought before I come back to that. Um, this sense of like, well, Mike, you're sort of you're not going to convince anyone when you say something like that. You're calling someone evil, right? That ends the argument. You're not going to convince them. I mean, I agree with this. This is a very very good, very good observation that I'm not going to convince them by calling them evil. I mean, it you know I think that when I think about throwing around the word evil, I try to be quite precise about it, precise about my use of it, and describe like why I think it's evil. And I think I did take care to sort of like tend to I think the necessity of spelling out what that evil is. I think I did that in the piece and gave a definition. But of course, the protest still comes. Like, how can you say something like that? How can you say something like that, Mike? You can't call them evil. These are people doing their best, just trying to make, the best decisions they can for the um okay. Sure. But anyways, I want to read this comment. The comment comes to me from Aaron Hanna. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He says to me, readers should listen to the same All In podcast that Mike did because they will interpret it very differently, even if you end up equally critical of the hosts. This is not good versus evil, which is the author's framing. Oh, I've been very uncivil. This analytical lens is way too simplistic. Uh-oh. Have I become Manichean in my moral reasoning? Uh-oh. Okay. Well, let's continue. Um, the kind of rational calculations the author considers immoral, evil, are exactly the kind of calculations that leaders have to make all the time. Ooh. These four men are men of great responsibility. I must understand this. I mean, their portfolios, are valued in the billions of dollars. After all, sorry, I'm just going to keep reading. Um, Take for example the bombing of nuclear facilities. Is that obviously immoral evil? I mean, no, but I mean, we can talk about that. I mean, I'm kind of a moral philosopher, so I mean, if we want to have that conversation, we can. But like, I don't understand like why we're having this conversation. I don't think it has anything to fucking do with my point. But I mean, this is a example, I think, of a non sequitur in this person's protest. But I digress. I continue. Might Israel have fought a much longer war with more civilian casualties if we hadn't bombed them as precisely? I mean, Aaron, I mean, I don't know if you're here. I don't know if you'll ever see this, but and I did respond to Aaron in text, but for the sake of you, the listener, and those watching me, I might suggest that like I don't understand like why you're talking about this at all. I didn't mention Israel at all. Really, like in terms as a policy matter, I talked about their analytical detachment, the inappropriateness of their register, talking about the war as investment opportunities. I wasn't opining on these matters. But anyways, I digress. I'm going to continue. Um, is it not strange, Aaron continues, that U.S. presidents pre-Trump all argued that Iran must never have nuclear weapons, and yet let Iran continue to inch towards nuclear weapons, even though Iran pretty clearly had no intention to stick to civilian uses of only the claim. I mean, this person wants to have a different argument than what I'm having. I mean, my argument was that these men are evil because they are essentially prioritizing their own power and wealth to the exclusion of our collective inheritance as a society, right? Our democratic, Republican institutions in the United States. And so I'm making a moral claim about the role that they're playing as civilizational actors, and I'm saying that they're evil in that context. So I don't know what the fuck this has to do with with like Iran, but like okay. Um, let's continue. Um, must they couch their analysis in the language of empathy and human rights to be moral or legit? Okay. Anyways, I think they were genuinely shocked at how effective the bombing ceasefire seems to have been, and were a little bit giddy. Okay, so Aaron, it's like what are you saying here? Like you're saying to me that I should like grant them the sort of like the sort of like a moment of what, right? Like to celebrate the win, some foreign policy win of Donald Trump, to which they've like tied their political identity and fate, and that I should grant them the space to celebrate. What are you talking about, Aaron? This is fascinating because Aaron's really saying that I'm being rude here, and I take the claim very seriously that I'm being rude and inappropriate and incivil by calling these men evil. But let's continue on. Weren't a lot of us a bit stunned, irrespective of our wealth or partisan affiliation? I mean, okay. My point is not to defend the podcast gang. Okay, all right. So that wasn't his point. That wasn't his point. His point wasn't to defend them. Okay. Well, all right. So, okay, what is his point? Let's find out. They certainly have their moral blind spots. On that, we agree, Aaron. They certainly do have moral blind spots. I agree with you on that. And Sachs, you spelled Sachs incorrectly, by the way. That's not how he spells his name. And Chamath don't seem to realize how much and cringy they come across as shills for the administration. So it's interesting, right? Like, because he's like, there's like this, he's almost like agreeing with me, but disagreeing with me. He's like sort of like managing this like weird like epistemic tension. That has something to do with like civility and politeness and nothing to do with the fucking truth. But let's continue. But these are very normal human beings, Aaron says. Perhaps a bit smarter than average. Perhaps. Trying to make sense of a very messy world given their very limited experiences. Is that good versus evil, or just too human, or all too human? I guess I'm just not sure what Mike accomplishes by abandoning persuasion for a trust me blanket denunciation. Well, I reject the accusation that it was a blanket denunciation. It was certainly nothing of the kind. It was a well-reasoned denunciation that gave moral reasoning and connected it to like fact claims in the world that you can either dispute or not. I mean, this is this sense of like this demand for civility that you see coming from elite culture. And it's, well, one could describe this as morally confused, because he's not even saying I'm wrong. He's just saying what I said was just like, he's complaining that I'm calling these men evil. And saying and appealing to me and getting me to try and see their humanity, for me to sort of understand their fallibility. I mean, I certainly understand their fallibility. I understand my own fallibility, right? I think being a intellectually honest person requires epistemic humility, and Aaron sort of, he sort of tilts towards that notion, when he says that, they're just normal human beings trying to make sense of a very messy world given their very limited experiences. But here's the problem. These men have a lot of power. They have a lot of power. They have economic and political power. David Sachs has political power. He's part of this administration. He defends this administration. He apologizes for this administration in ways that one can be quite sure that David Sachs knows that he's lying, because he has demonstrably contradicted himself, and snarkily sort of like twisted himself into pretzels to, avoid, admitting to very obvious truths. And so you're saying this is just a man who Aaron, you're telling me this is just a man who has, he's just honestly, he's just trying to do the right thing. Really? I don't think that somebody who lies as much as David Sachs and is very obviously intellectually dishonest as David Sachs and is very obviously acting in ways that redound to David Sachs's power and wealth to the detriment of the collective public interest. David Sachs, immigrant from South Africa who grew up in apartheid South Africa, David Sachs. Um, and you're appealing to me, Aaron. You're saying, Mike, can't you just see that he's just trying to make sense of his like limited experiences of the world? I mean, David Sachs is an Ivy League educated man, right? He's a degree from Stanford. Um, he's clearly very intelligent, actually, right? He's capable of quite sophisticated reasoning, from what I can tell. He's a successful investor, and he also he's also clearly like very Machiavellian in how he uses his public image to try and shape perceptions cynically, to redound to whatever interests he's pursuing. This doesn't seem like a confused person. This seems like a malevolent person in our society by any measure. That's malevolent. That's malevolent. I mean, maybe not to him because maybe he doesn't think that society should hold these values from which I stand, in which to judge him as malevolent. Those commitments being the liberal commitments that I believe in, the basic liberal values that everyone is equal under and before the law, that you know that we legitimate our political leaders through you know democratic processes and elections, and that we don't have any kings or potentates or dictators or emperors in America. We don't do that. And Sachs seems to disagree on that point. That makes him an enemy, I think, right, of the American Republic. I mean, just based on his political and ethical disposition. There are a lot of people, and it. I mean, it's fine. We have the First Amendment in this country. He can believe whatever he wants. I don't think that I agree with the First Amendment, and I agree that fascists should be completely free to make their fascist arguments. And I myself am more than happy to meet them on the debate stage, and I'm sure many other people are as well. To disassemble their deceptions and their lies, which are just basically self-serving, and they're trying to weaponize the worst elements of human nature to their own benefit. That's what they're trying to do. That's what David Sachs is doing. That's like who he is. So you want to tell me he's just this like sympathetic human being? I don't agree. I'm sorry. And does that burn bridges? I mean, maybe. I mean, I have a lot of people who don't talk to me anymore because they don't think it's very appropriate that I'm saying these things about Silicon Valley figures. And fuck them too. Says a lot about their capacity, right, for making the basic moral distinctions that I think are required for democratic citizenship. So, yeah, I mean, people can, if they want, like accuse me of hyperbole on the point of like whether or not like David Sachs is evil. Well, I've just described to you, I think, in excruciating detail, in an intellectually defensive way, how I judge him as evil. Given admittedly the fact that I show up to this argument with liberal commitments, unapologetically, basic liberal commitments, classical liberal commitments that are imbued in our beautiful Constitution that was ratified in 1787 after the Constitutional Convention. From that perspective, I would say that he's evil. I dare say the founders would agree with me. I think if this case were put in front of them, that they would see him as a malignly interested in things that contradict the continuation of a free and democratic American republic. Um, I mean, that much is clear, right? The man is a fascist reactionary. It's like who he is. There's a lot of them today. I mean, Curtis Yarvin, who many of you know, is like, oh, he's just saying a lot. He's saying it out loud. JD Vance has said it out loud too. They want to bring an end to this republic. They think it has run its course. JD Vance has described it as this period of time as the late Republican era. That's what he has said in interviews. And and David Sachs is one of these men who believe that America has entered a place of institutional sclerosis and civilizational decline. And yeah, they think they're going to bring this fascistic vitalist energy and reconstitute a new civilization on the ashes of the American republic and her more broader global order. That's what they think. And you want to come at me and say that I'm being uncivil and rude by pointing out that I think David Sachs is evil for that reason? Well, I mean, well, fuck you. Fuck you. I think at some point, if one is to take seriously the notion that we are a nation, a free nation, a democratic nation, a proud and now almost 250-year-old republic that has been a project of continuous, human flourishing and expansion. Obviously, our country's history is is filled with many moral tragedies, but moral victories. We've seen the progress of continuous moral victory, right? We ended slavery. We you know we established women's suffrage. We had we had sexual liberation. You know we um, we had the civil rights. We had the civil rights revolution. We had the revolution around sexual of sexual identity and freedom, right? Same sex marriage, right? This country has led the way in many ways culturally in this world, and I think that there is a strong tradition of moral progress in this country that should be celebrated. And I defend that tradition. Um, it's very obvious that the tradition of having to fight for progress is one that must continue, and it's one that I'm trying to embolden in this moment with all the things that I'm saying. But I think it's a worthwhile cause. I think pursuing moral progress in service of greater human flourishing is a beautiful idea and a proudly American idea. Um, you know, it's like God bless America, right? I think that that stance um, is still alive. I think we're seeing it. Americans are getting rowdy. We're protesting now. We're getting angry. We don't like what we're seeing. But yes, these disgusting men on the All In podcast, um, they stand opposed to that idea. They see it as empty rhetorical flourish, empty sentiment, a bunch of like bullshit cultural excess that gets in the way of efficient capital allocation. Well, we'll see about that, won't we? Right? You know, we're seeing the beginnings, right, of it, of a populist backlash against capital. And like I said, I'm not anti-capitalist. I'm a liberal, but I mean, I mean, I don't this notion that Mandami's primary election win in New York City is going to be the thing that kills the Democrats' chances. I mean, I don't think so. I think culturally, there's a, I mean, this goes back, I think, right, to the cultural pathology that we see on display with Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez's wedding that we talked about at the beginning of the stream. Um, People are getting pretty disgusted by this, including, I mean, even conservatives, like even like moderate kind of conservatives, never Trump conservatives. Like when you listen to them, right, on the Bulwark podcast and stuff like that, they're saying these kinds of things too, right? I mean, you can kind of see it. I was watching, a podcast on the Bulwark. I don't remember which one it was, but it was with Bill Kristol and Tim Miller, and you can kind of see it's like they're kind of like struggling to criticize Mandami, too much, even though he's not really their cup of tea, and they're struggling to criticize him because what we're talking about here, because these like corrupt fucking oligarchs um, are literally trying to like seize control, right, of our constitutional and legal inheritance. And and yeah, it becomes harder for people who like have a belief, right, the basic belief in like the rule and law in our institutions, to sort of fault like people supporting someone like Mandami who's promising to go after people like that, right? I mean, a lot of, and I am like, I mean, I do think that like a lot of these policies, rational policies, can be achieved with I think more centrist fusionist approaches. Although I will say some things, I do think we need to raise taxes, like in this country. Like we do have to deal with this budget deficit, and that means the rich have to pay more fucking taxes. That's just math. Um, but I mean, like the cultural backlash that I think is coming for people like you know David Friedberg and Jason Calacanis and David Sachs and Chamath Palihapitiya. I mean, it's like the late 19th century all over again, right? We're in another gilded age, and people are really, really pissed off now that they're starting to figure out what's going on. I mean, you know, the the wealth of sort of Amazon, of sort of like faceless consumerism, you know, holding the most opulent wedding that the world has ever seen in Venice, I think is, I mean, it it points to a moment of like extreme moral crisis for the world. This is an extreme moral crisis, right? I mean, I think I was saying to someone like earlier today. I mean, I'm not a Christian, like I'm not a but you go but I'm familiar with Christian mythology enough to sort of like like start like like struggling like not to see some sort of like allegories here, right? I mean, they're really, I mean, it to some extent, right? The tech right is like Sodom and MAGA's like Gomorrah, right? In this moment, uh it's like a moment of like complete like moral collapse. um and it's hard to unsee like once you see it, and you can kind of feel it in the air, right? um and I think that's why actually a lot of people might be surprised why you're seeing a lot of centrists um sort of not necessarily freaking out about Mondami, actually. I mean, you see some of them are, right? Some of these arch conservatives and stuff are freaking out. But I think you're seeing a lot of moderates who are sort of more muted. And I think it's recognition, right, of this cultural moment of like, holy shit, um, these, you know, historically rich and powerful men um have completely, completely, um, you know, taken over our political sphere and are currently in the process. And I know that people are going to point out, some objections that come from the tech right here, and we can talk about that. But this convergence of interests in our Congress right now, around the big beautiful bill, um, it's just obscene, right? I mean, they're trying to thread a needle. They're trying to thread a needle, and it's a very disgusting. And apparently, the Senate is voting on the bill right now at this very moment. Maybe if there's if there's some result is determined, maybe I can have a hot take reaction. But the obscenity of the fact that what Republicans are trying to do right now, very clearly, is one, they do understand at some level that the bond market is only going to give them so much leeway before we enter into a serious sovereign debt spiral. They get that. They know that there's some moment of crisis coming. They also so they know they need to cut spending, and they need to like buy themselves time because they want to get all their capital into fucking crypto or gold or Bitcoin or something, and they want to pay very very little taxes while they're doing it, while they're creating all these tax events to like move their capital around the world, and between different asset classes and stuff like that. So they really want to just like fucking just like pile their fucking money bags to the fucking ceiling and take as much as they can. And so they want to get that tax cut through. And they recognize that the only real way that they could potentially hoodwink the rest of the world and borrowers of US debt, is by taking a substantive chunk out of entitlements, out of Medicaid, Medicare, Obamacare, um, food stamps, those kinds of things that the poor depend on, the poorest among us depend upon. And so the rich is like, we need to save money so we don't crash the whole financial system, so we can afford these tax cuts in a way that won't cause the global treasury market to freak the fuck out. So what we need to do is we need to have a whole bunch of propaganda. We have to get our like right-wing talking points out there to convince the fucking moronic voters who were dumb enough to vote for us, and convince them that this is actually good for them, um, even though it's going to dramatically fuck them over. And they're like in a race against time. That is literally what is happening. It's literally what is happening. Well, Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez are getting married in Venice. I think, I mean, what is one to say about that, right? This is moral collapse. This is moral crisis. Like far beyond even the political crisis that we find ourselves in. This is an extreme moral crisis of prodigious proportions. Like we are literally living in a biblical Sodom and Gomorrah moment. And yeah, I mean, I think the time has come, right? For I think the time has come for justice, right? And I hope that that's what happens, right, in the midterms next year, and I hope that's what happens in 2028. That there is a popular, hopefully cross ideological movement in this country that agrees that it needs to band together, take back power on basic democratic principles, and then have a serious conversation about the relationship between capital and power in this country. And a lot of people are going to need to go to fucking jail because there are I mean, this is a moment. This is a moment where we need to sort of culturally I mean, think about this, right? These motherfuckers, and we should note that this bill in the Senate quadruples the funding of ICE, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, which has been brutalizing American citizens, uh, literally blowing doors open with explosives, with American citizens, women and children inside, to deport people. This is like really happening. Um, Innocent people have been renditioned to a fucking foreign gulag in El Salvador. And these like elite people want to talk about civility. They want to quadruple the funding for that. You want you want us to be reasonable and go easy on you when we finally take our country back? I mean, is that what you expect to happen here? After this vulgar display of state violence and your corruption, your conflicts of interest, the funding uh, of of sedition, of seditious political activity, to subvert our constitutional way of government, and deny it, and try to deny us the inheritance of our founding and our historical forebearers. You expect that we're just gonna sing fucking kumbaya in 2029? No, that can't be the answer. And honestly, I think that any political coalition that comes together, I will be very, very disappointed if they promise pardons in the cause of national unity or something like that. No, this is a civil war of a kind. This is a moral civil war, and we need to win it. And the actors that have committed these historical crimes against our country. I mean, the shutting down of USAID was completely fucking illegal, by the way, and unconstitutional. And hundreds of thousands of people are going to die as a result of that. Trump coin? Are you fucking kidding me? Yeah, I mean, there's no like there's no let bygones be bygones come 2029. Um, when we take this country back. Like, you motherfuckers are going to jail. That's the message. I mean, you've crossed a line. And I think that's the energy that we need that we need to have in this moment. It's time to take the moral high ground. There's nothing, at this point. I just want to say, we talked a little bit about the anti-woke reactionaries. I get it. Yeah, I mean, these leftist identitarians, I mean, they can get pretty fucking crazy. We're not talking about that anymore. I mean, if you're on the left right now, you're a liberal, you're a centrist, you're part of the sort of the Democratic coalition or independents who plan on voting against this motherfucking shit, you have nothing to apologize for. These people should be on their knees begging while they repent, for the moral sins that they visit upon all of us, that we're all paying the price for, by the way. They've put us in existential danger. So no, I mean, we are going to have trials. That's what's going to happen. And if these motherfuckers try to pardon themselves, we're going to have a conversation about like what we do about that, because that's an unacceptable outcome as well. So anyways, that was my cultural critique and sort of moral judgment on society for today. That was fun. That was cathartic. I got some stuff out. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you guys are having a happy Saturday. Um, Sorry if I got a little bit heated there. But that's how I feel. So have a wonderful day, everybody. And remember what's real.